Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is a roaming prepper, and I'm your host, Pete. Today, I'm going to be doing my typical Saturday Sitrep. I'm going to go through all the news that's going on around the globe. Now, just to clarify, if you're new, everything I'm talking about is either a public release from the government or a public media release, or some other announcement that I actually can talk about. Now, I may speculate about some of the stuff, but everything that I'm discussing is public sphere knowledge, so to say. I'll be right back, and let's get through our Saturday Sitrep for the 27th of May, 2023. I'll be right back. Hey, welcome back, everyone, and thanks for joining me again. Speaking a little low-key because Sassy's on a conference call over there, so I'm trying not to echo through the house. My escort corgi, Peppermint, is literally passed out next to me. She ran Bentley off because apparently I belong to her, or she's my dog, and so he didn't belong. So poor Bentley is over there commiserating with the others. In any case, going on to the news, I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm going to start in Africa, and then I'm going to go around the continents and talk about some things of interest. So, interesting one out of Africa, the first one actually, and this is from the East African newspaper, so it's called the East African. Kenya denies claims of being hacked by China. Kenya has refuted claims of being hacked by the Chinese following a Reuters expose that claimed the attacks targeted Kenyan government departments for a period of 3 years. Now, any of you who are following the behavior of Russia, China, and the U.S. know that China has vested interests and is very much trying to extend the sphere of influence into the African continent. This was a new one to me. I didn't know that there was even an allegation, but apparently Kenya's denying it, which is interesting. Now, the same token, in Ethiopia, Eritrean forces stop a UN mission in Tigray. Eritrean forces prevented a mission led by UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs deputy head of Ethiopia from entering a village in Tigray on Thursday. Now, there's been a very contentious relationship between the UN, the WHO, and the people in Africa. If you recall, about 10 years ago, they suddenly started killing doctors who were giving vaccinations. And then after 2020, it makes you wonder if whatever meds were being dispensed maybe were not awesome and were maybe pissing people off. Again, speculation. I'll probably get flagged for saying that at, 18 months from now. But in any case, yeah, not a good thing. Senegal government pledges firmness ahead of Sonko's return to Dakar. So, again, Senegal, Somalia, talking about a lot of instability, in particular Somalia. The Al-Shabaab, which is an Al-Qaeda offshoot, is been attacking peacekeeping bases. Again, a contentious issue between the European-based UN or the US, the Western-based UN, let's put it like that, and the people of Africa. That was from Al Jazeera News. In Sudan, Sudan is still undergoing a civil war. Battle rages in Sudan's Darfur on 4th day of truce. So they had declared a truce so that humanitarian food and aid could get into the country for the civilians, and they could evacuate those same civilians. But apparently a battle or some kind of firefight broke out in Darfur. So the truce lasted a whole 4 days, and they got into it again. So interesting. Now, moving from Africa to East Asia Pacific. Cambodia's opposition party barred from the elections, leaving the strongman unchallenged. Now, this is something else we're seeing since the coup occurred, is that we're seeing a lot of authoritarian figures coming up and countries that they don't have a check and balance. Now, this happens all the time. Cambodia is uniquely interesting because Cambodia and Vietnam are right now having major issues with China. So the U.S. State Department said it would not send official observers to witness the election and is deeply troubled by the decision. That's from Time magazine. Indonesia, this is Yahoo News, separatists in Indonesia, Papua, threatened to shoot Kiwi hostage if denied talks. So Indonesia is a very large country, has a lot of financial and manufacturing influence in Southeast Asia, or the South Pacific, as well as in the world, Indonesia, Malaysia. But all of these countries have problems, much like the Chinese have in their western part of their country, the Uyghurs, I keep mispronouncing it, the Uyghurs, who are a Muslim minority. Indonesia is dealing with separatists. And these are the kind of little fractures in a manufacturing country you want to watch out for, because, for example, if for some reason, say, some country is not getting favorable trade with Indonesia right now, they may support these separatists to try to overthrow the government. On the flip side, if we have a favorable trade agreement, we're going to assist that same government to stay in power. This is a power play that has been going on forever. But interesting, because if China is descendant as far as being pushed out of American manufacturing chains, Indonesia, Malaysia, and India are going to pick up that slack. So this is very interesting that they're all of a sudden having problems. Japan is shocked by a heinous attack, 4 die in a gun and knife rampage. That blows my mind because I thought guns were completely illegal in that country, so how someone got one. This is from CNN. How someone got one in that country just makes no sense to me. But clearly, it can be done. And it goes back to the adage that, you can make certain things illegal. You're just going to create a black market for it. Some people may disagree with me, but in any case, this is the second time. So they killed the prior prime minister with a homemade, basically a blunderbuss. It was like a musket type tube. And the guy killed Shinzo Abe. And here we had another incident of people being killed. It also makes you question if people are being manipulated via social media or some other psychological manipulation to where they're being provoked, an otherwise unstable individual is being provoked within any given society to lash out. So a lot of these mass shootings, suicide bombings that we've seen of late, they're not religiously motivated. It seems like somebody just flips out. And I, honest to God, hypothesize that there are bad players out there, or just be assholes who go through social media, they interact with people, see someone they realize is kind of not right, and peck on that person until they provoke them to do something in a certain way. So you never know, I could be wrong, but just interesting. Going into Europe, France detains Channel migrants after clashes with police. So a group of migrants came across the Channel, and they wanted to enter England, and they clashed with police. They got run out, and they were sent back to France, where they are now in custody, because that's not what they were supposed to do. Now, with war, with the food disruption that we now have in Central Europe and Eastern Europe, specifically the two countries that are fighting, there's a diminished amount of calories being distributed into certain parts of the third world. And that's only exacerbating people migrating to places where they can basically find food. You add to that the flooding in Pakistan, some epic flooding and other storms in Southeast Asia and in Africa and in the Middle East. And what you've created is a recipe for these same people to start to move into the European or to the West to try to find somewhere viable to live. This is not unheard of in history, but the war, because we're all so interconnected with global trade, the war between Russia and Ukraine is causing all sorts of cascading issues elsewhere. And I talk about a lot of these type of topics in my domino effect series. So don't forget to go check out that playlist. In any case, moving on in Europe, Italy. Oh, and that last story was from Yahoo News again. So in Italy, this is Euronews. Italian government's anti-LGBT rhetoric blamed for the brutal beating of trans woman in Milan. So Italy is reverting more to a nationalistic, more Catholic roots. And the government is stating that LGBTQ is not going to be a standard in schools. It said they're pushing back hard, basically. And apparently it's riled people up to where they beat someone up in the street. I think as cultures are being force-fed this very Western concept of being like that, it's not even a Western concept, this very fringe concept out there, it's actually going to cause more people to lash out. And that's unfortunate because it's no longer about simply living your life. They're trying to access children, they're trying to access schools, and people are getting pissed off. And this is unfortunately what may result, for good or for bad, whether you agree with it or not, when you try and upend the traditional culture of another country, they're going to get pissed off. And we're seeing it in Italy is a great example. So Russia, Ukraine, speaking of those two countries, and this is Reuters on MSN News, Ukraine shot down 10 missiles and over 20 drones. They're giving a lot of the credit to the Patriot missile system. Now, an interesting side note, which was also in the publicly available information that's out there, is that the Ukrainians found that if they tweak the Patriot, it becomes very effective against these drones. Like they modified the algorithm or something. So they got some smart cats over there. And now they're shooting the crap out of everything coming their way, including recently they shot down 2 Sukhoi 25s. Actually, it was a man-portable anti-aircraft. They were trying to avoid the Patriots and the S-300s that are out there, and they got shot down by infantry. It appears they were using the Igla, the old Igla anti-aircraft missiles, but they damaged one and forced it to land in Russian-occupied territory. The second one actually was destroyed. It blew off the tail. The pilot ejected and landed on the Ukrainian side, and I believe that pilot was captured. It may be wrong, but both planes were down. Apparently, both pilots lived, but Russia lost the use of 2 fighter bombers in a matter of hours because of this upgraded capability. So the question is, if they cannot control the air, are they going to escalate in another way to try and regain control on the battlefield? Because Bakhmut and that whole battle in those oblasts on the eastern side of Ukraine, those battles are becoming horrendously bloody, and nobody's really moving. They're almost at a stalemate right now. So we'll see where that goes. So in Turkey, amid the Turkey election, a Syrian man's murder stokes fear among refugees. This is in the Washington Post. Basically, the campaign is very nationalistic. They're talking anti-immigration. And apparently a Syrian immigrant was subsequently murdered. Again, you're going to start seeing cultures clash because things are happening and it's moving cultures, people into other people's homes and cultures. And there's going to be clashes, and then there'll be violence. And this is not unheard of in history. But we're seeing it globally. It's not simply like, oh, they're moving from A to B. It's like all over the place. So interesting. You got to keep a watch on this. Moving to the Middle East, Israeli's military, this is Associated Press, Palestinian man killed after alleged stabbing attempt in the West Bank settlement. He came out and started attacking Westerners, and he was promptly shot to death in the street. Lebanon, here's another interesting one. Now, you remember a few years ago, Lebanon had that massive explosion with ammonium nitrate that blew up one of their primary dock facilities and destroyed about 2 years worth of grain, if I recall correctly. It was a massive amount of food, grain that the nation needed. So here we are a couple of years later. This is by the Associated Press. A World Bank approves $300 million financing to help the poor in Lebanon. The World Bank approved the $300 million additional financing to Lebanon's poor, providing cash payments to help families struggling through the country's historic economic meltdown. Now, if I were the World Bank and I wanted a country dependent on my bank, I would go and blow up all their food. Just saying. But that's just me being a smart. But in any case, I'd throw that out there. You guys decide what you want. South Central Asia. Moving on. God, I'm going to get this one taken down. Y'all know that. In India, Section 144 imposed in Northeast Delhi to avoid dangerous situation ahead of the G20 summit. The G20 is in India. In order to prevent any riot-like circumstances before the G20 events, Delhi police enforced Section 144. I have no idea what that is, but I'm assuming it's like some kind of special law or special, like an emergency proclamation to allow them to control the area. So, and this is the Hans India newspaper. Pakistan hands 33 protest suspects to military for trials. There's a lot of protests, people lashing out against their governments all over the place. It's actually kind of interesting and exciting because it kind of is like the Cold War all over again, but we screwed up all the countries and the maps are different. But in any case, Western Hemisphere, moving on. Brazil's Lula, that was the former felon who won the election and caused riots, summons ministers as Congress seeks to dilute environmental powers. Brazilian President Lula da Silva on Thursday summoned his environmental and indigenous affairs ministers for emergency talks after Congressional Committee passed a bill gutting the ministry's environmental oversight powers. Going on to Cuba. Cuba is in a financial toilet at the moment. Cuba says no quick fixes. Economic crisis drags on. There is no quick fix for Cuba's sputtering economy, its economy minister said on Thursday, as inflation, fuel shortages, plunging foreign production, and a cash crunch drag on output and continue to fan discontent. And then, again, food, water, discontent. Seems to be a running theme in almost every other country I'm talking about. Have you noticed? Mexico, citizens group urges police in Tijuana to revamp crime-fighting tactics. And at the same time, Mexican president urges Latino voters to reject DeSantis after campaign launch. I'm not sure why. That was both, one was from Reuters and one was from Border Reports. So, not to back DeSantis on the next election, accusing the Republican politician of trying to win votes at the expense of migrants. Whatever. He needs to listen to the first article that says they need to revamp their crime fighting and not worry about our election. But a lot of violence. Did you notice this recurring theme this week in a lot of places? And maybe it just was the way the articles fell, but it was a lot of inflation, lack of food, poor farm production, other issues leading to people being pissed and fighting the government or going somewhere else and fighting the local people in the place they migrated to. Absolutely unstable situation pretty much across the board. And even right now, like Turkey and Greece, who are both NATO members, have been having this ongoing dispute over some islands for the last 50 or 100 years. It's just, there's a lot of weird things going on. And it's important to kind of watch this. Now, what is this week's situation do for us? Like, what is our takeaway on this week's Saturday Sitrep? Well, in a nutshell, expect, at least in the next couple of quarters, you're going to continue to see a lot of this instability. Every nation I mentioned is having some kind of financial issue. Now, what's funny, if all the nations are in debt, where the hell did the money go, right? Normally, if Peter has money and Paul doesn't, and Paul borrows from Peter, then one guy has the money and one doesn't. But it seems like nobody has the money. The oligarchs probably have the money, and they're the ones causing all the shit. Who the hell knows? But bottom line is, you're going to continue to see, as these nations destabilize, especially places like Libya, places like China. Actually, China was intruding in Cambodia's offshore oil field also, which I didn't mention here, which is partnered with Russia. So Cambodia and Russia are operating a joint oil field, which is a massive oil and gas facility, plus a refinery. And China just decided to roll a cruiser through there, pissed off the Cambodians, and the Russians are calling, asking them what the hell they're doing. The end of the day, I don't think China and Russia are really the best buddies everyone would like to think they are. I actually think those two are not going to get along at some point in the future, and we may live to see the bear and the dragon actually get into it at some point. But until that point, we're going to continue to see these kind of disruptions. It's going to raise fuel prices. It's also indicating that there's a food shortage in the third world. There are food issues elsewhere, and those are the kind of things that affect us here at home, in the West, if you will, and it affects everyone, to be honest. So this is why it's important to make sure you understand your food, you make sure you have an inventory, whether it's you can afford 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, whatever the case may be. I'd also recommend have a diversity of types of food, not just freeze-dried stuff. Have canned food, have vacuum sealed, have Mylar bag stuff. Make sure you have a mix. Much like I've said before, diversify financially. Have some gold, have some cash, have some silver, have some stocks, have a little of everything, because we don't know what's going to happen. Do the same with your food. Make sure you have that variety you need to address these situations. And if you can grow your own, that's even better. And even if you're growing your own, diversify. Don't grow a bunch of zucchini if you don't like zucchini. You know, grow other stuff. Grow a mix to balance your diet in your home. So anyway, folks, that's it for this week's Saturday Sitrep. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you all on the next video. Until next time, God bless, Godspeed, and I hope you got a little something out of this week. Take care.